Longest Day, Longest Night by Rainbow Double Dash. Chapter 7, Raising of the Moon. The remainder of the day passed without incident, as did the night and at least part of the following day. Carrot Top arrived with her cart early in the morning, before any of the apple clans showed up, as did the other produce sellers of Ponyville that Trixie had, by hook and crook, had been able to drag into her scheme. None of them seemed particularly confident, but Trixie had managed to reassure all of them in various ways, mostly helped out by random ponies passing by who seemed confused as to what was happening. But when Trixie explained her intentions, at least put on a show of being happy to have more than just apples to eat tonight. The arrival of the Apple Clan's veritable Armado stalls around 3 o'clock was where the problems began. Although, for the rest of her days, Trixie would treasure her memory of the look on Applejack's face. "What town is it I'm looking at here?" the orange Earth Boy demanded as she stomped up to Trixie's home. Trixie paused a moment as she chewed softly, looking to the ensemble she had in her telekinetic grasp. "Well," she said, "first I started with a few carrots, which I diced up and mixed with butter. Or I meant to anyway, but I was out. But there still was some cheese, and what the hey, it's all dairy, right? So then, if looks could have killed, then Applejack's glare would have depopulated the entire region." "Oh, you mean the food stalls? Well, I thought over our conversation from a few days ago, and I thought to myself, hey, I've known Princess Luna for a decade now, and I know what she likes to eat and what she doesn't, and I know for a fact that if she doesn't have anything but apples to look forward to, she'll probably go crazy and let discord loose or something." Applejack's glare managed to grow deadly enough to wipe out all of Equestria, and a good portion of the surrounding nations as well. "I thought we were on the same page here," she intoned. "I thought y'all understood just how much my family depends on the sales from tonight." Trixie nodded. "Yeah, but then I thought how much they..." Trixie jerked a hook behind her, at the vendors who were trying their hardest to look at any direction but towards Applejack's. "Need the business as well." "But they weren't expecting none," Applejack exclaimed. "They get by just fine every year all the same. This ain't nothing but dribbling all over centuries of Ponyville racing." Trixie pulled out one of her most unpleasant smirks. "Applejack," she intoned, "are you worried that you can't compete?" The orange pony backed up several steps, as though Trixie had struck her. "What?" she demanded. "My apples, my family's apples, are the best in Equestria! My family's recipes are the best!" "But do we really know that?" Trixie asked as she tapped her 2 in front hooves together. "Every year you get the 3 biggest holidays to all to yourselves. Must be comfortable up on that throne you've built from apple cores. Must be a scary thought of actually having to... oh, I don't know. Fight! For your business?" Applejack's glare returned with a force that could have knocked out the sun and moon from orbit. "I think you may want to stop talking now," she said, ordered in a low voice. Trixie obeyed, but her clan was very loquacious to a fault. After a few moments of regarding it, Applejack trotted up to Trixie, her face getting very, very close to the unicorn's own. "I don't know what y'all are playing at," she said, then looked past Trixie at the other farmers. "Hey, y'all! But it looks like you want a fact, and Luna is my witness. I'm willing to oblige." "Excellent," Trixie responded, stepping back a few paces, but only so that she could wave her front hooves in a sewing manner. "Now turn right off, because I have a lot of... I'm going to murder you!" An almost impossibly loud voice shouted from straight above, reaching and maybe even surpassing volumes that Trixie had previously thought only Princess Luna was capable of. Trixie and Applejack both looked up to find a small, jet-black cloud hovering directly overhead, cackling with barely contained lightning. Standing atop of it, panting heavily with wings spread wide as threat, was a jasmine-coated Pegasus. Raindrops led from her cloud, landing in a thud next to Applejack. She briefly turned to look at the Earth Pony. Hi, she said. Howdy, Applejack returned, tipping her hat. You might want to stand back. Applejack glanced at the miniature thundercloud overhead. I reckon I might just do that, she said, cantering away into her clan. She kept an eye over her shoulder, however, looked on Trixie. The mare had the distinct sense that Applejack was trying to preserve the look currently plastered on Trixie's face so that she could treasure it for the rest of her days. Raindrop's attention was turned once more to Trixie. She took a single step forward, though with enough force to actually crack one of the cobblestone stones beneath her hooves. Trixie blinked at that. She had expected Raindrops to be angry. She had not been expecting a pony who could break stone with hooves. Her bare hooves, as it seemed that Raindrops, like most Pegasi, went without shoes. Weather for higher ponies, Raindrops said, her voice now frighteningly calm. I got up and brushed my mane, went to work this morning, and I found a dozen of those reprobates swarming my weather patrol station. Is that really your... Don't care! Raindrops exclaimed, taking another step forward. No, as it turns out, I happen to recognize one of them. Oh yes, I recognized him. He's the leader mind of that group of... For a moment, before she could resume, the words failed her. He was kicked out of flight school! Not flunked out. Not dropped out. Kicked out! Do you know why, Trixie? Ask me why he was. Trixie didn't. Raindrops once again stabbed a hoof and broke the stone beneath her. Ask me why, Trixie! Why? The unicorn asked in a small voice. It doesn't matter why! Pegasi, we're pretty rowdy as yearlings, and in Cloudsdale, that's always taken into account, and so the kinds of things that would get a pony expelled from school down here would probably just get you a detention in Cloudsdale. So for him to do something so bad it got him kicked out, it's a miracle he has any job at all. It is a sin that his job is leading a weather for hire team. So Trixie, I'm going to murder you, then I'm going to murder him, and I am going to enjoy it! I didn't know, Trixie objected. She gathered a modicum of courage, stepping forward. You're the one who told me no promises about that storm. Raindrops didn't budge an inch. So, you don't trust us to do our jobs? You think that this is the first major storm to roll out of Everfree? The first time we had to deal with something like this? But no, you have to go and hire a bunch of flight school flunkies! He has the job, Trixie interrupted. He came highly recommended, so whatever happened in flight school, it clearly didn't have anything to do with his weather abilities, and I spent just about my entire monthly stipend on him and his team. She leaned forward once more. And you're the one who complained about missing your weather manager. I was just trying to help. Raindrop's trees ground together with such force that Trixie was surprised he didn't crack. One full day, Trixie said, pressing what little grounds he had gained. Just one day and one night. That's all they're hired for. Just to keep the storm from rolling into Ponyville and ruining everything. After that, they're gone. The jasmine-coated Pegasus leaned forward, right up to Trixie's ear. Sleep with one eye open, she intoned, before beating her wings, ascending slowly to her thundercloud and carting it off. Trixie watched her go, then allowed a huge sigh of relief. For somewhere near the town hall, she heard chuckling that somehow managed to be accented with a country drawl, but chose to ignore it as she turned back home. Carrot-Top and the other ponies were staring at her. What? She demanded, stomping down the path that led from the street to her front door. You have work to do! Get to it! The last was punctuated by Trixie opening the door, stepping inside and giving it as hard a slam as she could manage. Despite the culmination of 2 straight days of standing on the surface of the sun, the beginning of the twilight, about 2 hours later, was almost a relief. By now, the stalls had been set up, and several unicorns were working a concert surrounding the town center to create a bubble of warm air for the multitude of ponies that were even now making their way there. More than a few were surprised by the additional stalls for Carrot Top and the rest, but more than a few were happy to have more than just apples to eat, though the trust itself was cleaning up nicely regardless. As the sun began to approach the horizon, the pre-festival spirit was fairly high for most ponies. In addition to the food stall, there were games of chance and skill, like hoof throwing balls at a target or bobbing for apples, the latter, surprisingly, having been set up by some pony not related to the Apple clan. There were several open areas where vinyl records were playing music for dancing, and Vinyl herself was also rocking out some music for dancing. Trixie was paying attention to none of it. Earlier in the day, she had finally gotten around to seeing the mayor of Ponyville, formally introducing herself, presenting her credentials, engaging in light and friendly banter that served as a pleasant temporary escape for the last few days. But most importantly of all, rushing through approval for a last-minute performance to be added to the longest night retinue. Given that the music that was supposed to have been provided by Fluttershy was now largely absent and had to be provided by phonographs, it wasn't hard to arrange an hour-and-a-half break from the sometimes dubious quality records, and instead put Trixie's scheme into full motion. That was for after Luna had arrived, however. Right now, Trixie was standing in the crowd of hundreds of ponies inside Town Hall. Warmer than outside was, even with unicorn magic, albeit stuffier. Through her window, she could see a darkening sky, red and purple and not a cloud in the sky. Ringing the auditorium where the Apple Clan stands. But more than a few ponies were carrying foodstuff acquired from outside, for Carrot Top and the others as well. The decorations, despite Lyra's warnings, looked just fine. Not as fine as before, but they had been adapted to take the arts and crafts projects of the school falls into account. Rarity apparently deciding to spread them around throughout the auditorium, to turn the place into almost an art gallery. And Lyra was with her mare friend Bonbon, dressed in a fine white and gold gown, and Lyra slung over her back, ready to play. Trixie had worked everything out. Trixie was alone. This was a feat in and of itself because she was, properly speaking, never more than 6 inches away from any pony. But it was as simple as that. She was alone, despite being in the middle of a crowd. She wasn't talking to any pony. She wasn't outside celebrating. She wasn't doing anything more than just sitting near the middle of the auditorium, next to a dark blue Pegasus mare who was chatting amicably with a gray-coated Pegasus stallion. He looked like an off-duty royal guard, and doing little more than counting down the minutes until Luna arrived, and wondering how she managed to, in a matter of 2 days, get everything right, and yet screw everything up at the same time. Trixie let out a long sigh. Whatever. This was the course of her life now, and nothing would change it. Fillies and gentlecoats! A voice exclaimed. Trixie's reverie was interrupted at the sound, as he saw that the mare, an older pony with a beige coat, had made her way to the center of the stage and was trying to get every pony's attention. At great length, she mostly succeeded, though a few quiet conversations continued, including the unicorn and stallion next to Trixie. Lilies and gentlecoats, the mayor repeated. I hope you are all having a good time so far. I hope you slept into the morning this well, because all the fun games have barely begun. The shortest day of the year is drawing to a close, and now it is time to properly begin the longest night celebration. There were cheers and hoof stomps at that, but they were relatively subdued. Every pony knew, after all, what was coming next, and they wanted to get to it quickly as possible. Now then, the mayor continued, turning slightly to face the curtains that obscured most of the stage. As Mayor of Ponyville, it is my greatest pleasure to officially introduce and welcome our guest of honor, our ruler, savior, and our protector, the Shepherd of the Moon, caretaker of the sun, mistress of the star beast, sovereign of the three tribes, the ruler of the land of Equestria, her royal majesty, Princess Luna Equestria! The curtains pulled back, revealing nothing. Technically untrue. There was some more stage, a wall, and another curtain that hid the backstage area. But as for the alicorn herself, totally absent. Some ponies gasped in horror. Some ponies sputtered in confusion. Some ponies simply stock still, completely dumbstruck. But the Pegasus pony standing next to Trixie had continued her low conversation as if nothing was wrong. A surprisingly oversight on her part, and one almost utterly ruined her disguise. Trixie let out a long, low sigh, reached over and poked the pony next to her. The Pegasus turned in temporary confusion, for her wide eyes widened. "Oh," she said softly, beating her wings a few times, taking to the air, soaring over the stage and landing there. She turned to the mayor. "My deepest apologies, Mayor," she said, then turned to the confused Ponyvillians. "And to you all! This festival is delightfully distracting. Just give me a moment to collect myself." There was a midnight-hued flash and a pop from somewhere in the crowd. Quite suddenly, standing next to the Pegasus, was her unicorn doppelganger, identical in every way except for the lack of wings and the presence of her horn. Following that, an earth pony, more identical to the other two ponies, simply leapt onto the stage from where she had been standing in the crowd, more than a dozen feet away. The earth pony landed evenly and smoothly, despite the impossible distance of the Dead Star jump. As soon as the three together, each began a soft, blue-like glow. The Pegasus and the unicorn moved first, turning to each other and simply stepping into one another, features becoming indistinct for several long moments before coming together once more, revealing that they had become as one, and also changed in appearance slightly. A longer snout, mane, and tail laced longer, though still light blue, and a somewhat more slender, delicate fang. The pony that had resulted had both wings and a horn. She hadn't remained still for very long, turning instead to the earth pony, who also stepped into the other pony. Once more, they faded from clarity for a moment, but the single resultant pony was markedly different, taller than most stallions, frame still slender, but no longer delicate in appearance. Instead, more like that of a trained runner, with tight, well-worked muzzles from underneath her blue midnight coat. Her mane and tail were no longer hair at all, but rather a glowing aura of midnight blue studded with stars and rippling as though water catching a clear night sky. The pony's flank glowed, and her star cutie mark was replaced by a nebulous cloud, but one that was overlaid by the presence of a white crescent moon. Following this, the pony's hooves, chest, and the tip of her head behind her horn glowed momentarily. And in a moment, she was clad in the royal regalia of her blue shoes, a deep blue chest plate with a crescent moon emblazoned on its floor, and a black three-pointed crown. The Ponyvillians stared in odd silence. Trixie managed to suppress a loud groan of exasperation as the alicorn who stood on the stage spread her wings wide. "My little ponies," she said, her voice soft, yet firm, perfectly wrinkled, yet carrying a slight hint of embarrassment over her earlier distraction, albeit one that she had managed to turn into an impressive display of her magical power. "Your Princess of the Night has arrived!" The applause was just shy of instantaneous. Luna beamed at it, offering her best royal smile. After a moment, she raised a hoof in for silence, tucking her wings against her body once more. "This imminent night carries deep meaning. It is a time of endings, a time of beginnings. Since the height of summer, the days have been growing shorter and colder, the world withering as the leaves died and had to be taken from the trees. The last harvest was taken in as the Pegasi began the 3 months of winter. The first snowfall sealed the fields from the light of the sun and moon, and the cold hardened the ground and turned the water into ice. The old year is dying, and tonight is a finally pass on, consigned to the realm of memory. But take heart, my little ponies, for if this year passes, a new one is to begin tonight. The days shall grow longer and warmer, the snow shall melt, the ground will soften, and the earth shall once more become receptive to your care, and stronger and better, for having the winter come to rest. Tonight, the old year dies, but we do not grieve for it, for its passing makes way for the new year, and the endless possibilities that the year contains. She smiled. I walked amongst you tonight, disguising myself as a Pegasus and a unicorn and an Earth pony. I spoke with many of you, danced with a few of you, shared food, drink, and laughter. From all of this, my little ponies, from your character and your accents, I have reached a necessity about this necessity incoming new year. It shall be a good one. The collected ponies looked amongst each other, smiling. More than a few were blushing furiously, likely being ponies that Luna had interacted with while in disguise, even now mortified at the things they may have done or said, but happy nonetheless. For Luna, the princess, shepherd of the moon and caretaker of the sun, had blessed the new year due to their actions. Luna's smile never faltered. Now then, she said, turning to look at the mint-green unicorn, wearing a white and gold dress, and who was holding a lyre in her magical grip. I believe a little music is in order for what comes next. Lyra stared blankly for a moment before realizing what Luna was asking. She nodded as professionally as she could, before settling down into a position that looked backbreakingly uncomfortable to most ponies, hooves at the ready. At a nod from Lyra, she began to pluck her lyre, horn glowing to amplify the sound, and to providing backup music despite the lack of a band. To Trixie's surprise, the sound that came out wasn't the national anthem at all, but instead something far simpler in arrangement. Lyra nodded approvingly before turning back to the ponies. Close your eyes, she said as her horn glowed and midnight energy washed from it like a wave over them. The ponies obeyed, and instantly they were no longer in an auditorium. They were outside, high above Ponyville, and standing in the sky as Luna spread her wings wide. Behind her, to the west, the sun dipped down beyond the horizon, the last of its light disappearing, and for a brief moment, everything was utterly black. Then in the east, the first silver of silver light appeared on the horizon. The silver widened, becoming a beam, then a wide ray, before finally a silver, full spear began to rise from the horizon, bathing the entire countryside in a soft light. Every pony gasped at the sight, though any further reactions were cut short as Luna leapt, appearing atop the rising moon. Despite the distance, every pony could see her clearly as she stood there, utterly still as she guided the moon fully over the eastern horizon, before leaping again. But this time, not alone. From behind the moon, following her, came a million points of light, following her, like a wave as her mane and tail flared with magic from along her horn. Luna began dancing among the sky, hopping, skipping, twirling, and spinning, a deep primal dance as the stars chased her across the sky. She would wave her hoof and sting up dozens at a time, swing her mane and imprint them in the patterns of the familiar constellations. The stars would move of their own accord as well, twirling around her body, as though trying to embrace her. Sometimes she would let them, holding them all close before releasing them into the night sky once more. No pony knew exactly how long they watched Luna dance. Eventually, the stars following her began to thin out, until finally only one was left. This one, she placed firmly above all the rest in the north, nuzzling it before drifting away, back to the awestruck ponies. As she landed, the ponies found the world fading back to normal. As they were once again in the auditorium, dusk as Lyra brought the musical accompaniment of Luna's Moonrise and Stardance to a close. Silence prevailed for several long moments, before Luna bowed, wings spread wide. That set off the Ponyvillians. It was surprising that the entire town hall didn't come crashing down for the force of their host stops. Luna smiled widely. Trixie, meanwhile, let out an exasperated groan as he'd been holding back, since it couldn't be overheard of the ponies, sound of ponies anyway. Ugh! Great! She said in a low voice as he turned around. That's the act I have to follow. Chapter 8. Return of the Queen. Were the immortal alicorn anywhere else, it would have been impossible for Trixie to even attempt to avoid her. But, as it stood, tonight, Luna was powerless, because she was the princess. Every pony wanted a moment of her time, to ask for advice from being with the wisdom of millennia behind her. Every pony wanted her blessing on some task they wanted to undertake. Every pony wanted to give her some kind of gift, and her accepting that it would be taken as a sign of royal approval. But mostly, every pony simply wanted to bask in her presence. It was interesting. Many ponies feared Luna for her power, being essentially the physical embodiment of the night, and rare was the pony who didn't have 100 opinions about the night court and the dark, shadowy competitions enacted by the noble herds of Equestria that afflicted the lives of thousands of ponies, and similar opinions of Luna, who orchestrated the night court to her whims and was often seen as some kind of manipulative schemer who was directing all of Equestria in a game to which only she knew the rules. The game of this. But on the other half, she had just done for them what some ponies were describing as the most beautiful sight of their lives. Up close and personal, Luna had seemingly worn inapproachable. Which meant that every pony, except one blue unicorn, wanted to approach her. And that blue unicorn was doing a far better job of keeping away from her mentor than she thought she would have been able to manage. Trixie took a deep breath. She had finished clearing out a large space in front of her new home, cording it off with a few chairs used to create an impromptu acting arena. She wished she had a proper stage to work with. But then again, working on street level had its own charm, or at least that's what her grandpa, Quartermoon, had said about his early days in show business. Not as many ponies would be able to see her, but they would hear her almost as well, and their curiosity would be all the greater. Trixie had a moment of doubt as she stood still, a visibility spell wrapped around her form. Once she started, there'd be no going back. She didn't fully know what Luna's reaction would be, but it certainly wouldn't be pleasant. Still, Trixie reminded herself that Luna had banished her to Ponyville, had dumped her here to rot. Stealing her resolve, Trixie channeled her magic through her horn. Fortunately, her invisibility spell did its job of hiding her presence. She cast 2 spells simultaneously, an illusionary, bright fireworks, not quite as good as the real thing, but certainly attention-grabbing, and a ghost sound copy of the noise of fireworks display to accompany it. There was, of course, a crush of ponies nearby, as every pony wanted to be inside the unicorn-created bubble of warm air. Still, she had succeeded at getting a large number of ponies looking her way, eager to see what was coming up next tonight. Fillies and gentlecoats! Trixie exclaimed, still invisible, after wrapping another spell around her throat, which would enhance it enough so that every pony nearby could hear it without trouble. She set off some more fireworks. These ones streamers that mostly spun in the light show. Come on! Come all! Come and see the greatest show in all of Equestria! Tonight, on the longest night, see the astounding magical prowess of the one and the only descendant of the legendary Star Swirl the Bearded. Technically, actually, it was Star Swirl's sister-in-law, but the Ponyville need to know that. Trained in the arts of sorcery and spell-shaping of Princess Luna herself, the great and powerful Trixie! And with that, Trixie threw down a final illusion and let her invisibility spell slip as a bright flash of cerulean smoke filled her staked-out arena. The smoke dissipated quickly, leaving only Trixie, clad in her cape, of course, but also wearing a dark blue undershirt and a deep purple jacket with loose sleeves on her front legs, buttoned across her chest and stomach. It was part of what she had worn to the last Gravelly Gala and fit her theme perfectly. She already had a small crowd of ponies standing in place, ready and waiting for her to live up to her introductory speech. Most particularly, with such an overt and bright display of color and sound, she had attracted what Grandpa Quartermoon had always claimed was the key to any successful magic show. Foals, little colts and fillies who were so much easier to fool with sleight of hoof, and always had a much less critical eye. "And now then," Trixie said to the audience, "quick note before we begin all that." She waved her hoof behind her, as though referencing the light show she had just put on. "Some spells, little illusions, and ghost sounds that flashing lights that any unicorn could do with practice. And I, Trixie, am not saying it was easy, and I'm not saying it wasn't, in its own way, magic." She turned around, flicked one hoof, and from seemingly thin air produced a pair of scissors, which she caught with telekinesis. "But the really impressive stuff," she said, flicking her other hoof and producing a large quill. "Well, that's what Trixie intends to show you." Trixie produced 4 more items that she had found in her home: a deck of cards, a carrot, a flask, and a pair of silver bits, as well as a sheet of paper and separate black writing quill. Using her telekinesis, she laid out the first 6 items in front of her, from left to right, in the order that she produced them in, so that the scissors were furthest to the right, and the bits furthest to the left, while the black quill and paper remained separate from the pile. Smiling at the audience, she wrote a few things on the paper, then folded it in half and moved her line of items forward, while praising her Maya's items. She then smiled when she noticed one filly in particular, wrapped in a small, full-sized winter cloak and sitting. "You there!" Trixie exclaimed, pointing a hoof at Dinky-Doo. "Come here for a minute." The unicorn filly's eyes widened a little as he looked at Dinky-Doo as though for permission. In response, Dinky smiled and nudged Dinky with one hoof. The filly trotted eagerly forward at that, stopping on the other side of Trixie's line of items. "You say your name for the audience," Trixie said, waving a hoof at ponies watching. "Dinky-Doo!" The filly exclaimed brightly as she looked at them, though she turned back to Trixie quickly. She nudged to look forward a little and spoke in a quieter voice next. "I figured out how you made that bit appear on top of my head." Trixie smiled. "Did you? Well, here's a new one." In a louder voice, looking more at the audience than Dinky, she continued, "And now then, Dinky-Doo, name a number between 1 and 6. 5, Dinky said, eyeing the flask. "The F-I-V-E, Trixie spelled out, both pointing to the bits first and then moving backwards, until she ended up on the deck of cards. "Oh, thank goodness, I don't know much magic involving carrots." As she said that, she unfolded a piece of paper hovering behind her, showing that she had written a deck of cards on it. 2 colts seemed impressed by the trick, but most everyone in the audience seemed underwhelmed. "That wasn't magic," Dinky pouted a little. "Not really, no," Trixie confirmed as she put the remaining objects on the ground behind her, and used her telekinesis to withdraw the 54 cards from within, and spread them in front of Dinky. "And now then, pick a card, any card. Show it to the audience, but do not show the great and powerful Trixie!" Dinky considered the cards in front of her, with the same kind of weight that an older mare would have given to her wedding dress. At length, she indicated one. Trixie nodded as she pulled back the deck together again, shuffling the cards thoroughly as she trotted forward, so that way she was next to Dinky-Doo. As she did, she flourished her cape slightly. "All right," she said, holding up the deck of cards and looking them over, considering the great and powerful Trixie thinks it was. She reached the end of the deck, was confused for a moment. Then stamped her hoof with realization and pointed, "That one!" Trixie didn't point to the deck down at all, but rather straight down and Dinky's hooves. The filly looked down, and her eyes widened as he backed up several pages, in surprise at the car laying face down beneath her right front hoof. No pony had seen arrive there. There were gasps from the audience as well. Trixie telekinetically lifted up the card, considering its face for a moment before turning it to Dinky in the audience. "7 of clubs?" she asked rhetorically. Dinky's face, and that of the surprised audience, told her the answer already. Dinky nodded, as did Trixie, even as she turned back to her piece of paper and unfolded the remainder of it, where she had written 7 of clubs. Cue the hoof stops. Trixie thought with a smile as the applause came, reserved but appreciative from the adults in the audience, but very enthusiastic from the 15 or 20 fillies and colts watching. Trixie bowed, and encouraged Dinky to do likewise before sending her back to her mother. Dinky's brow furrowed as she tried to figure out Trixie's tricks. "Good luck, kiddo," Trixie thought with a smirk as she got ready to pull out the nails and get to a more impressive magic. She stoned herself as confident enough, but now it was time to wow the audience. With a wave of her hoof, she pulled from the resting point far behind her stool a bright white ball and a trio of metal cups. "Now!" Trixie said as she placed the items in front of her. The ball and cups stood on top of the stool. "This is one of the oldest tricks in the book. 1 ball, 3 cups. You all know it. Some of you have probably done it, but you know how it works. And where's the fun of that?" Trixie emptied 2 cups and considered a moment, then shrugged and tossed them over her shoulder, back where they had been. 1 ball, 1 cup. Trixie glanced at her audience and saw her. Princess Luna made her way to the front row of adult ponies, just behind the filly and colts that were making up the front row of her audience. The ponies had noticed her and were bowing in respect. Luna acknowledged these with a nod, even as she sat down on her stomach amidst the foals, offering them a bright smile. Then her gaze was focused entirely on Trixie. Trixie offered a formal curt bow of her own. "Princess Luna." "Trixie," Luna confirmed, bowing her own head. "My most faithful student. Please, do not let me interrupt you more than I have already." Trixie wanted to grimace, but hid the expression well. "All right, as I was saying, 1 ball, 1 cup. Try to keep up." Quartermoon the Magnificent was considered the greatest magician of his era, probably the greatest magician to have ever lived, a feat made all the more impressive by his being an earth pony. When he went on stage with nothing more than his signature top hat and cape and beard, he'd been able to receive applause. When he brought pups to work with, that applause transformed into standing ovations and cries of an encore. Trixie was Quartermoon's petite fille, his granddaughter. Growing up with him in the house in New Orleans, Trixie couldn't help but try to pick up his tricks, as he always displayed a natural talent for what Quartermoon called real magic. Spells were impressive in their own right, but 1 in 3 ponies in Equestria could not only cast spells, but did so almost every day of their lives. No, to Quartermoon, magic was supposed to be deep and primal, hardly surprising for an earth pony to think such, but above all else, it had to be wondrous. If one saw an act of magic, or yawned, or thought of it as ordinary, then it wasn't real magic at all. That's a deep facsimile. Of course, everything she learned from her grandpa, the sleight of hoof, the art of misdirection, the smoke and mirrors, she was supplementing, tonight, with her own unicorn spellcasting. With her horn carefully hidden under her hat, no pony had any way of knowing when she was casting a spell, as she made a point of taking off her hat and performing through sheer sleight of hoof for a good portion of the show. Trixie felt somewhat bad for using spells to supplement her street magic, but her grandpa had said that it was alright for Trixie to do so, as long as the sense of wonder and mystery remained. Plus, while she was really enjoying herself, she was here for a purpose. "You want to dump me here?" Trixie thought, as she finished up another act, this one supplemented by an illusion spell Luna had taught her not 2 months ago. "You want to leave me here and forget about me? Fine! This is how I'll waste your teachings. The magic taught to me by an alicorn squandered on street magic. Trixie felt herself getting more than a little flustered, though she didn't show it as the show went on, and Luna had the audacity to not appear angry, or incensed, or even disappointed. She watched them passively, for the most part, her alicorn senses more than capable of keeping up with the sleight of hoof attempts. Once or twice, however, Trixie was able to pull off a stunt that baffled even her. Needless to say, those particular tricks were the ones that got the most applause from the audience, fools and adults alike. Eventually, she ran out of tricks, about half an hour before midnight. She had, at least, closed with a bang, a complicated mix of several illusions and sleight of hoofs that seemed to make the house her outright disappear, proven by the shining beams of light straight through it. Before returning it was her home after all, she remarked. By now, her crowd had grown to immense proportions, with her having to pause the show about halfway through to ask for anyone watching to sit on their stomachs to ensure that every pony who wanted to see her could. Ladies and gentlecoats, Trixie said with a bow before offering a deeper, seeming more gracious one to the princess. Princess Luna, you have all been a wonderful audience, and the great and powerful Trixie looks forward to entertaining you in the future. With that, Trixie threw her front hoofs wide, conjuring illusionary smoke and a ghost bang sound once more, using the distraction to make her exit straight backwards and into her home. By the time the illusionary smoke cleared, no pony could see her. Trixie let out a long, low sigh, standing still with her head pressed against her home door, eyes closed as she tried to decide whether she was angry, depressed, scared, all three, or something else. Regardless of how she felt, that was that. She hung up her hat near her door and trotted towards her living room, intent on getting a fire going, and just spending the rest of the longest night awaiting the wrath of Princess Luna. Hello, Trixie. Trixie wasn't even surprised at that. Opening on the door to her living room, she found herself face to face with Luna. She paused for a moment for posterity's sake, before making her way in slowly, glaring at her mentor. Princess, she said once fully inside, bowing, if you give me a moment to get a fire. One of Luna's eyes twitched, and a blue-hot flame ignited in the empty fireplace. A moment later, Luna levitated a few logs and tinder into place, and let them start burning. It took a few moments, but at length the fire cooled from blue to a more comfortable red, orange, and yellow as the logs and natural reactions took over for Luna's magic. She's angry then, Trixie noted. She sat back on her haunches, staring at Luna and waiting. Luna stared back, her own persistent matching Trixie's. For some time, the only sound was the cackle of flames and the occasional sapping sound as the fire found a pocket of moisture or air in the logs. Is it better, Luna asked at length, her voice completely neutral, for a leader of ponies to be loved or to be feared? Trixie blinked a few times. Trixie had not been learning just magic from Luna. She had been learning rhetoric and politics as well. And that particular question was among the first that Luna had ever posed to her. Both, Trixie answered, confused at the conversation's turn. It's best to be both, if possible. And if not, the ability to create such feelings of others can rarely be found together in a single pony. And it depends on the pony, Trixie continued. Some ponies do better with love, others with fear. It depends on the circumstances of the time. Love is more, but it is outside a leader's control. Fear is totally within her control, but can lead to, yes, Luna responded. But whether a leader is loved or feared, what must he always avoid? Hate, Trixie responded. Contempt. Luna nodded, leaning back. Trixie, you have spent the last year moaning and complaining, without end, about not being able to put everything I've taught you to practical use. You have been wasting your time rather than continuing your studies. You have grown arrogant and self-assured about your own abilities, such that you have managed to drive away the very small number of ponies left in Catherlot willing to give you a chance. And after you've melted the ice palace at about the stupidity, you somehow managed to convince me that it was, in a way, my fault, that I was squandering your talents, that you were right, that it was time you were given a real job, a real responsibility within my night court. Luna stood. 2 days. She began to pace in a long, slow circle around Trixie. You have been in Ponyville for 2 days, and what have you managed to do? I have been assaulted by ponies all night, Trixie, asking me to intervene in their problems. And can you guess, Trixie, what name has often come up tonight? Trixie could, but she remained stoically silent, staring straight ahead rather than following Luna's pacing form. Luna's eyes narrowed. Your name, of course, Luna continued. I had one carrot top asking for official's royal sanction of her food stall tonight because she feared reprisals for the apple trust. When I asked her why she dared to set up the stall in the first place if she was so afraid, she said it was because she was blackmailed by you. Next, I was confronted by a weather pony named Raindrops, who asked me to officially outlaw weather for hire ponies and to do extreme things to a certain few in particular. When I asked why, she outlined how you had brought a dozen ponies into town on certain notice, and, by doing so, essentially told her and her entire weather team that they were incapable of doing their jobs. This was especially sticking at her, because it appears that the storm over the Everfree Forest, which the weather for hire for ponies were brought in to deal with, has dissipated utterly over the past few hours. Following this, I met a unicorn named Rarity, who was quarreling with an earth pony, Terrily. Rarity alternated between informing me that Terrily had ruined everything, and apologized profusely for the decorations. When I remarked they seemed adequate, she almost fainted, and went on a great length about how they used to be different, showed me her wonderful sketch even, and how you had forced her to change everything for Terrily. This despite Terrily asking you not to do so. Then there was Lyra Heartstrings, a graduate of my own academy who I happened to bump into when I complimented her music. And honestly, I was expecting the anthem, and her last-minute change of mind was both surprising and more appropriate. Remarked that I was grateful that at least some ponies seems to have benefited from your presence. Well, the look on her face told me much of what I needed to know anyway. But in my insistence, you went into details of how you, by insulting her chosen profession, conned her into playing. Luna's slow pace brought her full circle, right in front of Trixie. She did not sit back down as she glared at Trixie, the unicorn matching it evenly. And lastly, she said, I met the local leader of the Apple Trust, Applejack. She had a lot to say about you traveling over Ponyville to distance, about you challenging the quality of her family's produce, and essentially, about you being rude, confrontational, and in all ways unbecoming of a representative of my night court. But there was also another reoccurring theme besides your name, Trixie. Do you know what it was? Trixie remained silent. Luna scowled deepened as she spread her wings wide and took several steps forward, getting close to Trixie. Trixie, answer me. Trixie clenched her teeth. They want me gone, she guessed, don't they? Immediately, Luna confirmed. She lingered close to Trixie a moment more, before withdrawing, closing her eyes and sinking her hoof sadly, then wincing a little and rubbing one temple with her hoof. And all of this is not aided by the fact that I've had the worst headache I've had in centuries all through the night! After a moment, she turned to look at Trixie. Oh, by the way, that reminds me, your magic show. I am very, very disappointed in Trixie. Trixie suppressed a grin. Why? She asked. You don't think I'm squandering your lessons, do you? No, Luna responded. Trixie's eyes widened at that, as Luna continued. In fact, I wish you had hit upon this idea sooner. You are a vain, arrogant, attention-seeking pony, Trixie. but being on stage, with ponies watching you and giving you praise. That's exactly what you need as an outlet for that. Luna turned around to fully regard Trixie. No, and what I am disappointed in is that I know you, Trixie. I know you were hoping that I would believe that you were wasting your talents, that this isn't a genuine effort on your part. This was you trying to make me angry. Although don't fear, you have succeeded in doing that. Trixie felt something snap inside her. You're angry, she asked, shouting. Luna's eyes widened a little, as he was clearly trying to remember the last time any pony dared to raise her voice to her. You're angry! You sent me here with everything falling to pieces, and you have the gall to be angry! You exile me, and... Exile? Luna demanded, her own eyes narrowing as she stomped a hoof down. The room shook a little from the impact, but nothing moved. Trixie, you're the one who demanded more responsibility, and I gave it to you! No, you didn't! Trixie exclaimed, heart glowing brightly as she ripped the former Baron letters from her cape and hurled it at Luna. The alicorn princess caught it, looking it over. Trixie didn't wait as she stomped around. You send me here with the food being all the same, which I know you'd hate, and the weather spiraling out of control, and the music being handled by the most enterprising pony I've ever seen, so that I can suffer for the Ice Palace before I get to spend the rest of my days in this stupid town! You were not banished, Trixie! Luna shouted back as he finished reading the letter. Then why am I here? Because you asked to be! Luna retorted, once more stomping a hoof. Trixie, you have never held any position in Night Court. What? Did you expect to be given a position in Manhattan, Philadelphia, New Orleans? Did you expect me to shower you with land and titles? Ponyville is large, but comparatively quiet town, making it an excellent first appointment. That, Trixie began, then choked on her own words as enlightenment struck as hard as any lightning bolt. That makes a lot of sense, actually. Having gained the upper hoof, Luna pressed it as he stepped forward. Duke Blueblood, the entire Blueblood family, are entitled, over-dramatic snobs. But the previous representatives, Trixie began, turning around and rushing from the room. Luna followed, watching as Trixie ran to her office, producing letters from the other ponies who had held the title of representative in the past, pulling aside the bookcase and tearing open the safe behind there to produce a dozen more. Trixie levitated for them for all to Luna to see. They're all the same, she said, though her eyes were wide and voice shaking. They're all... Trixie, I have used Ponyville as a site for informal bashments, but the difference between exile and opportunity is a thin one. The fact that I sent them here, inside of Equestria, still, was usually more than enough of a hint that they only needed to get their acts together, and they could return to Cadillac. She looked over a few letters. Many of these ponies were back in my good graces long before their retirements. I do not know why they wrote their letters. Perhaps it was some sort of crazy ritual. Some sense of vindictiveness lingered. But the Duke said he wasn't vindictive! Yes, Trixie, because some pony says something, they must be telling the truth! Luna responded dryly, glaring at Trixie. So let me understand your line of reasoning. You trusted some pony who I'm not certain you've ever actually met, when he told you I exiled you here, in a letter written weeks ago, that because you thought you were exiled, you believed it was a good idea to make sure every pony in Ponyville hates you, and then, following that, make an attempt to make me angry at you! Trixie's mouth opened and shut a few times as she tried to speak, but no sound came out. Luna shook her head in disappointment. You owe Ponyville an apology for what you've done, she said, trotting up beside Trixie, and using a wing to begin nudging her student toward the door to her office. Over there, the door to the residency. You owe several ponies apologies. You owe me an apology. And after all that, she looked Trixie in the eye as she opened one door. Outside, the moon sat high in the sky. It was midnight. or close to it. I will have to seriously consider whether, after all this, anything I have taught you has been absorbed, and whether or not continuing your apprenticeship. Luna's voice trailed off, as Trixie continued moving forward mechanically, eyes wide still. It wasn't until she reached her home's front gates that she realized Luna wasn't beside her anymore. Blinking a few times, she turned to regard her mentor, and found that Luna was staring wide-eyed herself, straight ahead, due to the alignment of Trixie's house. It meant that she was almost perfectly to the east, where in the far distance, dawn's first light began to creep over the horizon. "Wait," Trixie said, her translated despair shattered. "Wait, Princess, why are you raising the sun?" "Sorry. I'm not," Luna said in a quiet voice, even as the golden disk appeared fully over the horizon. It was definitely dawn, even as the moon and stars were still perched in the sky overhead. The sun, in fact, was moving with speed that Trixie had never seen the celestial body move before, charging straight toward the highest point in the sky, as though it intended to shove the moon from orbit. The stars themselves were also moving in the sky, hurrying out of the way of the burning orb of fire, clearing a path in the brightening sky. Some of the stars were not fast enough, however. As the sun touched them, they would flare suddenly and vanish utterly. "Is it really a good idea to have the moon and sun in the sky at the same..." Trixie began, looking back to her teacher. Her words died in her throat when she saw the expression on Luna's face. Trixie had seen Luna angry. She'd seen her happy, seen her confused, irritated, tired, excited, enraged, ecstatic, impatient, embarrassed, and a million other emotions. But she had never before seen the princess look frightened. And properly speaking, she still hadn't, because to Trixie, Princess Luna did not, right now, look frightened. Luna looked terrified. "Princess," Trixie began, when Luna's eyes stepped shut and her horn glowed. Her form dissolved into blue, starry mist and shot away, toward the center of Ponyville. Eyes wide, Trixie dashed off. Princess Luna arrived in her mist form in the center of town as the sun was nearing the moon, which itself seemed to be either shrinking in the sky or else drawing backwards, moving away from the planet in orbit and making room for the sun, even as its edge appeared toward to touch the edge of the moon. Most ponies in Ponyville, or indeed Equestria, did not have experience of seeing it quite as wide of a range of emotions on their princesses' faces did Trixie. But even still, none of them had ever expected to see the look of abject terror that was transfixed on Luna's face as her mist form rematerialized in the town center, eyes darting from pony to pony. "Run!" Luna exclaimed in volumes normally reserved for making public proclamations from atop Carolina's tallest tower. "Run, my little ponies! The sunrise is not my doing! Flee to the forest and hide! She was interrupted by a cry of pain, her own, as the sun continued its movement, beginning to eclipse the moon. The moon itself began to blacken, as though being burned by the sun, until the burns did not physically appear on Luna. Her front hooves gave out as he howled at the fiery sensations that felt like they were spreading across her body. Unfortunately, this produced the exact opposite of what she wanted to happen. Ponies began buzzing forward to their tormented princess, looking forward to help her. Screaming in frustration, Luna spread her wings wide, with enough force to shove the ponies back a few good 30 feet. "No!" she exclaimed in spite of her pain. "You need to!" The words died on her lips as there was a hiss and a snapping sound, followed by the air around Ponyville igniting. Luna watched in horror. A line of yellow and orange flames raced around the edge of town, becoming a wall of fire 50 feet high. Several Tegasai tried to fly over the flames, but they would flare up as they draw near, forcing the Pegasai back. The only sound that could be heard above the cackling flames, which, at least, did not seem to be burning the buildings of Ponyville, was the screams of terror, fright, and confusion. At length, the moon was completely eclipsed by the sun, was blared brightly once more, then a second time, even brighter, then a third time, so bright as to turn every pony's field of vision white, even Luna's. Then, silence. A terrible silence, obviously magically created since every pony was still trying to scream in terror. They only stopped when the futility became obvious, and their vision began to return. "Fly, little ponies!" A voice broke through the silence as the sound of wings beating steadily in long, slow sweeps permeated the air. "My precious subjects, rejoice!" Every pony, Luna included, looked up at the unnatural midday sky and saw her, a large white unicorn, taller than even Princess Luna without her horn, majestic white wings beating steadily to perfectly control her descent to the world below. The features that were beyond difficult to make out as she glowed almost as bright as the unnatural sun. At length, she settled down on the cobblestone plaza that surrounded the town hall. Only then, as though testing the orb somehow lessened her, did that glow permeate her fade, and the ponies could see in her detail. Her mane and tail made from animate flames, her cutie mark of golden full sun, her regal subdued smile, and her eyes, completely white, lacking iris, pupil, or anything that would mar their appearance. Rejoice! The alicorn repeated, a broad grin on her face. Your true queen has returned. Luna forced herself to her hooves, ignoring the pain she felt all across her body. A pain that was lessening, at least, as her moon continued to withdraw from the equestrian orbit. See, it was breathing a great gasp, as she realized she was trembling in fear. She stopped only with a supreme exertion of effort, only for the benefit of her ponies. The white alicorn smile warmed softly as she regarded Luna. "Ah!" she said, taking a few steps forward. "Sister, thou hast grown last, since I have last set eyes upon thee." Luna could only utter a single word in response. Rona. Ladies and gentlemen, the fun's about to begin.